The massive hall stretched out like a crystal cave, its walls shimmering with soft blue light. Hundreds of alien beings sat in curved rows, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others breathed through gills on their necks, and a few floated in special chambers filled with glowing gas. At the center of the hall stood a tall, thin creature with silver skin and 4 eyes. This was Ambassador Kelthak of the Rigel system, and today he held a small metal tablet that would change everything. "By the power given to me by the Galactic Council," Kelthak announced, his voice echoing through translation devices, "I hereby declare the human species officially extinct." A wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. Some aliens nodded their heads, others clicked their claws together, and a few made sounds that might have been sighs of relief. Kelthak continued reading from the tablet. Homeworld Earth was destroyed by solar radiation 47 years ago. All human evacuation ships have been confirmed lost in deep space. No human has been seen alive for over 2 decades. In the front row, an empty chair sat alone. It was made of simple metal and looked plain compared to the fancy seats around it. A small nameplate read, "Human Representative, Captain Ji-Won Park." Dust had begun to gather on its surface. Captain Park had been the last human to speak in this hall. The records showed her final speech where she begged for help as her world died. She had stood right there, tears in her eyes, asking the galaxy to help save her people. But the vote had failed. Too expensive, they said. Too risky. Too many other problems to worry about. Now her chair was empty, and no one seemed to miss it. "This is excellent news," whispered a blue-scaled creature to his neighbor. "Humans were always causing trouble. Remember the trade war of 2387? Or when they tried to make peace between the Centauri and the Vegan colonies? They were too emotional," agreed a floating jellyfish-like being, always getting involved in other people's business. "Now we can have proper order." High above in the observation deck, more aliens watched through thick glass windows. These were the wealthy ones, the powerful ones who made the real decisions. They sipped strange drinks and chatted quietly among themselves. "Finally," said a creature that looked like a walking tree. "No more human interference in our trade routes. No more of their strange ideas about helping everyone and working together." "They were wild cards," added another, this one covered in shimmering scales. "You never knew what they would do next. Sometimes they would break rules to save lives. Sometimes they would give away valuable resources to help poor worlds. It was impossible to predict them." The formal ceremony continued for another hour. Speeches were made about the tragic loss and the lessons learned. But underneath the polite words, everyone felt the same thing: relief. The galaxy could go back to the way things had always been: stable, predictable, profitable. As the meeting ended, the aliens filed out in orderly groups. The great hall emptied slowly, leaving only the cleaning robots to sweep up the dust and organize the chairs. Even they avoided the empty human chair, rolling around it as if it carried some kind of curse. But far away, beyond the edge of known space, something still moved in the darkness. On a piece of metal floating in the void, an old machine continued to work. It had been working for 17,532 days without stopping. The machine was built by human hands, powered by human technology, and programmed with human determination. Every few seconds, it sent out the same message into the empty space around it. The signal was weak now, barely stronger than background radiation, but it never stopped trying. "This is Research Station Echo," the message said in a dozen different languages. "Day 17,532 since Earth's fall. The evacuation fleets have scattered to unknown space. We do not know if anyone can hear this signal, but if you can, please know. Humanity endures. We adapt. We survive. We will find a way." Message repeats in 30 seconds. The signal traveled through space at the speed of light, spreading out in all directions like ripples in a pond. It passed dead planets and empty asteroids. It whispered through gas clouds and danced around black holes. But no one was listening anymore. The Galactic Council had better things to worry about. Trade agreements needed to be signed. Territory disputes needed to be settled. Resources needed to be divided up properly between the important species. Nobody thought about the humans anymore. They were gone, finished, just another failed species that couldn't adapt when their world changed. It happened all the time in the galaxy. Life was hard, and only the strong survived. But sometimes, late at night on distant worlds, a few beings would look up at the stars and remember. They remembered Captain Park's final speech. They remembered how the humans had once helped their world during a crisis. They remembered voices speaking about hope and working together. These beings would shake their heads and go back to their lives. After all, the humans were gone now. There was no point in thinking about the past. The galaxy moved forward without them, stable and orderly and exactly the way it had always been. Captain Vexel stared at the reports spread across his desk, his four eyes blinking in different patterns as he tried to make sense of what he was reading. 3 cargo ships had vanished in the past month along the Outer Rim trading routes. Not destroyed, not captured by pirates, simply gone. "Tell me again about the last contact," he said to his communications officer, a small green creature with large ears. The cargo ship Profit Margin was carrying medical supplies to the Kepler colonies, the officer replied, checking his notes. Captain Zorak sent his regular check-in message at 14:30 ship time. Everything normal, then nothing. No distress signal? None. We sent search ships to their last known location. Found empty space, no debris, no energy signatures, nothing. Vexel rubbed his temples with 2 of his hands while the other 2 tapped nervously on the desk. What about the other ships? Same pattern. Regular communications, then silence. The crews of nearby vessels reported some strange things before the disappearances, though. What kind of strange things? The communications officer looked uncomfortable. Sightings of figures moving through open space without protective suits. Bipedal shapes like the extinct humans used to be. But that's impossible, right? Nothing can survive in vacuum. Vexel waved a dismissive hand. Space madness happens to crews who spend too long in deep space. Their minds start playing tricks on them. But even as he said it, Vexil felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had heard similar reports from other sectors, always the same details. Humanoid figures walking through space as if they were strolling through a park. Meanwhile, on the mining world of Zerion 7, Foreman Throck was having his own problems. He arrived at the mining site each morning to find his equipment moved during the night. Heavy drilling machines that normally required anti-gravity lifts to move had been carefully repositioned into perfect geometric patterns. "It's got to be the night shift playing pranks," Throck muttered to his assistant, a young creature with purple fur and too many arms. "Sir, there is no night shift," the assistant reminded him. "The site is automated after dark, and look at this." The assistant pointed to the ground around one of the relocated machines. In the dust were marks that looked almost like footprints, but strange ones. They were the right size for human feet, but they glowed faintly in the dim light. "Probably just some kind of mineral deposit," Throck said, but his voice shook slightly. "Clean it up and let's get back to work." The workers whispered among themselves as they reset the equipment. Old-timers remembered stories their grandparents told about humans, how they had been strong and stubborn and never gave up. But humans were gone now, everyone knew that. Deep in the crushing atmosphere of the gas giant Tempest, something that had once been human opened eyes that could see through methane storms. Hyun-woo floated in the dense clouds. His body changed in ways that would have terrified his former self. His skin had become translucent, with veins that pulsed with bioluminescent light. His lungs had adapted to process the poisonous gases that would kill any normal life form in seconds. Most importantly, his mind was connected to others like him across the galaxy through quantum entanglement that scientists claimed was impossible. Through this connection, he felt his sister Mira, who had adapted to live in the frozen methane seas of a distant moon. He sensed his friend Dae-hyun, who had somehow learned to exist in the radiation-soaked space around a pulsar star. They were all changed, all evolved, but still connected by something deeper than biology. "The galaxy thinks we're gone," Mira's thoughts whispered across space. They don't know we're watching. Should we reveal ourselves? Asked Dae-hyun, his mental voice carrying hints of the cosmic radiation he now called home. Not yet, Hyunwoo replied. We're still learning what we've become, still growing stronger. The transformation had been agonizing. When the evacuation ships from Earth had scattered into unknown space, each group had faced impossible choices. Some had tried to find new worlds to colonize, only to discover that every habitable planet was already claimed by other species who wouldn't share. Others had attempted to contact the Galactic Council for help, but their messages went unanswered. The galaxy had moved on, leaving humanity to survive or die alone in the void. So they had learned to survive in places where survival should have been impossible. They had adapted to environments that would kill any other known species. And in doing so, they had become something new. On a space station at the edge of civilized space, Dr. Yuki monitored deep space sensors that most people thought were just for detecting asteroids. But sometimes, just sometimes, she picked up readings that didn't match any known ship or natural phenomenon. The readings showed objects moving through space at impossible speeds, taking paths that defied physics. They appeared and disappeared, like ghosts leaving only faint energy signatures that could be explained away as equipment malfunctions. Dr. Yuki kept these readings to herself. She was one of the few aliens who had worked closely with humans before Earth's destruction. She remembered their stubborn refusal to give up, their ability to find solutions where others saw only problems. Late at night, she would look at the strange readings and whisper to herself, "You're still out there, aren't you? Somewhere in the dark, you're still fighting." But she never reported her suspicions. Who would believe her? The galaxy had declared humanity extinct. The case was closed. In the darkness between stars, the evolved children of Earth continued to grow stronger, watching and waiting for the right moment to remind the galaxy that some things refused to stay dead. The colony ship Zephyr's Dream drifted silently through the black emptiness between star systems. Inside the massive vessel, 10,000 Rigelian colonists waited to die. Chief Engineer Caltex stared at the engine readouts with despair. The fusion core had suffered a catastrophic failure during their jump to hyperspace. Now they were stuck in the void, too far from any star system for rescue to reach them in time. "How long do we have?" asked Captain Narex, her blue-scaled face showing the strain of command. "Life support will fail in 18 hours, Caltex replied quietly. "The backup systems are already running at maximum capacity." Captain Narex closed her eyes. 10,000 souls under her protection, including 3,000 children in the colony's nursery levels. She had already sent distress signals in all directions, but space was vast and empty. No ship could reach them in time, even if someone heard their calls. In the passenger sections, families huddled together as the air grew thinner and the lights dimmed to conserve power. Parents tried to comfort their children with stories and songs, but everyone could feel the cold touch of death creeping closer. Then something impossible happened. The ship's sensors, which had been showing nothing but empty space for hours, suddenly detected movement. Not one contact, but dozens of them, approaching from all directions at speeds that should have been impossible. "Captain," called the sensor operator, his voice cracking with excitement and fear. "Unknown vessels approaching. They're not using any propulsion system I can identify." On the main screen, shapes began to appear in the darkness. They were ships, but unlike anything in the galactic databases. They seemed to flow rather than fly, their hulls smooth and organic looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. The largest of the strange vessels moved directly toward the colony ship. It didn't slow down as it approached. Instead, it seemed to phase through the Zephyr's Dream's outer hull like a ghost passing through a wall. Alarms blared throughout the ship as the impossible vessel materialized inside the main cargo bay. The hull showed no signs of damage, no breach where the ship had entered. It was as if the laws of physics had simply stepped aside. An airlock opened on the side of the strange ship, but instead of the normal hiss of pressurizing air, there was only silence. A figure stepped out into the cargo bay, a figure that should have died instantly in the vacuum of space. The being looked human, but changed in ways that made the Rigelian crew step back in shock. Its skin had a faint glow, like starlight trapped beneath the surface. Its eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal understanding. Most unsettling of all, it breathed easily in the airless cargo bay, as if space itself was providing what it needed to survive. "I am Taeyang," the figure said, its voice somehow carrying through the vacuum to reach everyone's ears. "Once my people were called human. Now we are something more." Captain Narex found her voice through the communicator. You're human? But humans are extinct. Earth was destroyed decades ago." Taeyang's expression softened with something that might have been sadness. "Earth died, yes. And the galaxy watched it happen without offering aid. So we learned to live in places where no help would ever come." More figures emerged from the strange ship. Each one moved with the same impossible grace, breathing vacuum as easily as atmosphere. They spread out through the cargo bay, their hands touching the walls of the dying colony ship. "Your fusion core has failed," said one of them, a woman whose hair seemed to contain tiny stars. "Your life support systems are collapsing. You have perhaps 17 hours before total failure. Can you help us?" Captain Narex asked, hope and fear warring in her voice. "We heard your distress call across the quantum foam," Taeyang replied. "We could not let you die as others once let us face extinction alone. What happened next would be remembered by every survivor for the rest of their lives." The evolved humans worked with technology that seemed more like magic than science. They moved through the ship's systems without tools, their hands interfacing directly with alien machinery. The fusion core, which had been declared irreparable by the ship's best engineers, began to hum with renewed life. Life support systems that had been failing one by one came back online. The lights brightened and fresh air began to flow through the corridors. Throughout the ship, children stopped crying as warmth returned to their compartments. Adults wept with relief as they realized they would see another day. But the evolved humans asked for nothing in return. As quickly as they had appeared, they began to fade back into their impossible ships. "Wait," Captain Narex called out. "Why are you helping us? What do you want?" Taeyang paused at the threshold between dimensions. "We want nothing except to prevent suffering where we can. We remember what it feels like to be abandoned by the galaxy. Will we see you again? Perhaps. Tell the Galactic Council that humanity has returned. We are not what we once were, but we remember who we were, and we have become something the galaxy never imagined possible." The strange ships faded away like dreams, leaving only the repaired colony vessel and 10,000 lives saved by the impossible. As the Zephyr's dream resumed its journey to the distant colony world, its passengers looked out at the stars with new eyes. Somewhere in the darkness, humanity's children had become something wonderful and terrible, watchers and guardians who could appear anywhere, help anyone, and vanish again into the void between worlds. The galaxy's abandoned children had returned, transformed beyond recognition but still carrying the spark of compassion that had always defined them. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of the Zephyr's dream incident. The great crystalline hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to discuss the impossible news. Ambassador Kelthak stood at the central podium, his silver skin reflecting the chamber's blue lights. His 4 eyes darted nervously between the data tablets in his hands and the sea of alien faces staring back at him. "The reports are flooding in from across the galaxy," he announced, his voice shaking slightly. 17 separate incidents in the past week alone, ships appearing from nowhere, beings that look human but possess impossible abilities. Rescues performed with technology that violates every known law of physics. A creature that resembled a walking tree raised one of its branch-like arms. Surely these are just elaborate hoaxes. Humans have been extinct for nearly 50 years. We have official records. "That's what we thought," replied a blue-scale delegate from the Rigel system. "Until yesterday, when they saved 10,000 of our colonists from certain death. My people spoke with them directly. They claimed to be human but changed." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some delegates clicked their claws nervously, others made worried chittering sounds, and a few simply sat in shocked silence. "How is this possible?" demanded the Centauri representative, a floating jellyfish-like being. "Our deep space monitors show them building structures inside the corona of stars. Nothing can survive such temperatures and radiation. They can exist in the vacuum of space without protection," added another delegate. "Our frontier worlds report sightings of humanoid figures walking on the surfaces of airless moons, breathing poison gases that would kill any known species in seconds." The debate grew louder and more frantic. Some delegates demanded military action, others called for scientific investigation. A few suggested immediate diplomatic contact, while the more paranoid members spoke of quarantine zones and defensive preparations. Then the arguing stopped. The air in the center of the chamber began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot metal. The energy readings on every sensor in the building spiked to dangerous levels. Security guards raised their weapons, but the beams passed harmlessly through the disturbance. A figure materialized out of the quantum foam itself. He stood calmly, in the middle of the chaos, completely unaffected by the weapons pointed at him. His appearance was human but changed in subtle ways that made every alien in the chamber step back in fear. His skin had a faint luminescence, his eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies, and he radiated a presence that spoke of power beyond mortal understanding. "I am Minho," he said simply, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall without amplification. "I speak for those who were once human." The chamber fell silent. Even the most arrogant delegates found themselves unable to speak in the presence of something so far beyond their understanding. "You declared us extinct," Minho continued, his voice calm but carrying an undertone that made the strongest warriors shiver. "You watched our world die and offered no aid. When our refugee fleets begged for sanctuary, you closed your borders and turned away." Holographic displays suddenly activated around the chamber, showing images that defied belief. Cities built inside the hearts of stars, their buildings made of crystallized plasma. Gardens floating in the vacuum of space, tended by beings who breathed cosmic radiation like air. Libraries constructed from folded space-time itself, containing knowledge that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. "So we learned to make our homes in places where your species could never follow," Minho said. "We adapted to survive in the cores of gas giants, in the event horizons of black holes, in dimensions so tightly folded that space becomes meaningless." The images showed more impossible settlements, entire communities living in the quantum foam between atoms, beings who had learned to exist as pure energy, yet retained their human consciousness. Children playing in environments that would instantly destroy any normal life form. "Each environment changed us," Minho explained. "But we remained connected through quantum entanglement that your scientists claim is impossible. We became a single entity spread across the galaxy, yet each individual retained their humanity." Ambassador Kelthak found his voice, though it cracked with fear. What do you want from us?" Minho's expression softened slightly, showing a hint of the compassion that had once defined humanity. "We want nothing from you. We offer something to you." "What?" "The chance to evolve beyond your limitations, to transcend the boundaries of flesh and biology, to become more than you ever imagined possible." The chamber erupted in frightened chatter. Some delegates spoke of accepting the offer, others demanded more information, and many simply cowered in their seats. "Why?" asked the Centauri representative. "After what we did to you, why would you help us?" Minho smiled, and for a moment he looked almost like the humans they remembered from old records. "Because despite everything you did to us, we still remember what it means to show mercy. We still believe that all life has value, even when that life has failed to show us the same courtesy. But know this," his voice grew serious again. "Never again will you abandon the helpless while we watch. Never again will you let entire species die when help could be given. We are watching now from places you cannot imagine, and we will act when conscience demands it." The figure began to fade back into quantum foam. "The choice is yours. Evolve with us, or remain as you are. But the galaxy has changed, whether you accept it or not. As Minho vanished, leaving only empty air where he had stood, the assembled delegates sat in stunned silence. The age of easy assumptions was over. Humanity had returned, transformed beyond recognition, but still carrying the spark of compassion that made them both wonderful and terrifying. The galaxy would never be the same again. 6 months had passed since the day Minho appeared in the Galactic Council chambers, and the galaxy looked completely different. Where once there had been empty space between star systems, now strange structures floated in the void, buildings that seemed to bend light around themselves, stations that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Dr. Sujin worked in what the Evolved called a transcendence laboratory, though to most aliens it looked like nothing more than a shimmering bubble, floating in deep space. Inside, the laws of physics worked differently. Gravity flowed like water, time moved in spirals, and thoughts could take physical form. Today she was helping a group of young Altarians who wanted to explore the molten core of their homeworld. They stood before her in the chamber, their crystalline bodies trembling with excitement and fear. The transformation cannot be undone, Sujin explained gently, her voice somehow speaking their language perfectly, even though she had never learned it. You will no longer be entirely Altarian when the process is complete, but you will be able to survive in places that would destroy your current forms. One of the young Altarians, barely past childhood, raised a crystalline hand. Will we still be ourselves? Will we remember our families? Sujin smiled. I still remember being human. I remember my mother's cooking, my father's stories, the feeling of rain on earth. But now I can also remember the song of pulsars and the taste of starlight. You will be more than you were, not less. The first volunteer stepped forward and Sujin began the delicate process of quantum restructuring. It was not science as the galaxy understood it, but something deeper, a reshaping of reality itself to match the needs of consciousness. Meanwhile, on the frontier world of New Haven, 12-year-old Kaylee sat by her bedroom window doing homework. Math was boring, especially when she could see much more interesting things happening outside. Through her window, she watched a figure walking across the surface of the moon without any kind of spacesuit. The being moved gracefully in the low gravity, their form glowing softly in the reflected sunlight. They were tending to what looked like a garden, somehow growing plants in the vacuum of space. As Kaylee watched, the figure on the moon seemed to notice her. They stopped their work and waved, their gesture somehow conveying friendliness across the impossible distance. Kaylee waved back eagerly. Her parents had told her stories about the old days, when seeing someone survive in space would have been terrifying. But Kaylee belonged to the first generation growing up after the Evolved returned. To her, impossible things were just part of daily life. The next morning at school, she would tell her friends about the moon gardener, and they would share their own stories. Juno had seen beings made of living lightning dancing in their planet's upper atmosphere. Mika's older brother claimed he met an Evolved who could turn into music and back into solid form. The adults were still afraid, but the children adapted quickly. They always did. Back in the depths of space, the Evolved continued their quiet work. They had established embassy stations in locations that defied understanding. One orbited inside a pulsar's magnetic field, another existed in the space between dimensions, and a third was built from crystallized dark matter. Some species had embraced the chance for transformation. The aquatic cetaceans were among the first to volunteer. Their pod consciousness expanded to exist across multiple ocean worlds simultaneously. They sang songs that could be heard across star systems, their melodies carrying messages of joy and wonder. The proud Rigelians had initially resisted, but gradually accepted limited enhancements. Their crystal bodies now incorporated quantum processors that let them think at the speed of light. They used these gifts to solve mathematical problems that had puzzled the galaxy for centuries. Other species chose different paths. The Centauri remained mostly unchanged, but accepted Evolved. Protection for their colony ships. The tree-like Verdanians learned to photosynthesize cosmic radiation, allowing them to spread their forests to previously barren worlds. But not everyone was happy with the changes. In the darker corners of the galaxy, some species plotted resistance. They saw the evolved as a threat to the natural order, an infection that needed to be stopped before it spread further. "They're changing everything," whispered General Vorthak to his conspirators in a hidden base on an asteroid. "Soon there won't be any pure species left. We'll all be mongrels, half-breeds with no identity." "The old ways are dying," agreed another plotter. "We need to act before it's too late." But their weapons were useless against beings who could exist as pure energy. Their ships couldn't reach targets that lived inside stars or unfolded space. Every plan they made crumbled against the simple reality that the evolved were beyond their ability to harm. And still the transformation continued. On distant worlds, children looked up at stars that now held cities. In deep space, explorers discovered wonders that previous generations could never have imagined. The galaxy was becoming something new, something better, guided by beings who remembered being abandoned and chose to respond with compassion rather than revenge. The evolved kept their promise. Humanity endured, adapted, and survived. But more than that, they transformed everything they touched into something greater than it had been before. The galaxy that had once declared them extinct now danced to the rhythm of their quantum heartbeat, and the future stretched ahead full of infinite possibilities that no one had dared to dream. In the end, the greatest victory was not conquest but transformation, the patient work of turning a cold, uncaring universe into something worthy of all the life it contained.